Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed. At 1,000 subscribers, I'll be posting a special video. The pen slipped when I saw the last line on the form. My name is Aaron, and I remember the exact second. I was 28 then and already felt strangely old. That signature made me both his daughter and his cleanup crew. I signed anyway while my aunt watched every twitch of my hand. We were crammed in a small office behind the viewing rooms. The funeral director tapped each sticky flag like we were on a timer. My Aunt Linda sat so close our chairs bumped every few seconds. Her husband Rick hovered near the door and pretended to study brochures. I felt like the only person who remembered my father was dead. The last page listed next of kin and who handled arrangements. My dad had written my name there weeks before his heart stopped. Seeing it in print hit harder than the coffin 8 feet away. Linda leaned in and breathed out this little sympathetic sigh for show. Her hand squeezed my arm once, then settled on the stack of forms. The director pointed at the line with a capped pen and waited. I stared because the line said informant, which somehow felt insulting. Linda spoke before I could swallow the lump caught in my throat. She told him I was overwhelmed and that she could help with everything. Then she nudged the pen back into my fingers like I was 5. I wanted to say I can handle this and mean it. Instead, I mumbled something about being tired and let her half steer me. Grief does this weird thing where you hand out pieces of control. That day I passed her the biggest piece without even seeing the trade. I wish I could say I noticed right then, but I did not. Once the last copy printed, the director left us alone for a minute. Linda kept her hand on the papers and traced the funeral home logo. Then she went straight for it like she had practiced the line. We should talk about the house while everyone is here already. The body was not even buried and she jumped to real estate. My stomach clenched and then I hated myself for even reacting. People lose parents and have to handle houses all the time, right? That is what I told myself as I nodded like some obedient puppet. Linda smiled soft, but her fingers tightened on the paperwork under them. Looking back, that grip says more than anything she actually spoke that day. Do you still have his keys, or did the hospital keep them? Her voice dropped like we were plotting instead of planning a reception. I told her they were in my bag and her eyes lit quick. Good, we should swing by after this and make sure everything is secure. I heard concern, but I also heard first dibs hidden under that word secure. Rick finally stepped away from the door when she mentioned the house. He crossed his arms and asked casually if Dad still owed anything. The question felt like a slap because we had not discussed money yet. I said I did not know and that I would figure it out. He shrugged, but his jaw worked like he was chewing on numbers already. Linda and Rick traded one quick look over my head that I misread completely. Back then I thought they were just worried and trying to be practical. Now I know it was the look people get before a card game. They had already decided to play, and they saw me as the pot. I smiled weakly, and they treated that smile like permission to proceed. When we stepped out, people lined the hallway waiting with awkward hugs and stories. I floated between faces and hands while Linda kept me within arm's reach. Anyone who tried to ask about arrangements got redirected toward her bright, fixed smile. She told them I was devastated and that she and Rick would handle details. Each time she said handle, I felt another inch of ground slide away from me. At one point, a distant cousin asked where I would be staying that week. Before I opened my mouth, Linda answered that I would be at my apartment. Then she added we might move a few things into storage to help me. I corrected her and said nothing had been decided yet, and her smile flickered. It lasted half a second, but that crack in her face told the truth. An older family friend slid in after Linda wandered off to refill her coffee. He squeezed my shoulder and told me quietly to get a good lawyer early. I laughed because it sounded paranoid and I was already drowning in tasks. He said grief makes people weird about money, then moved back into the crowd. That was the first warning that did not come wrapped in a fake hug. When the service ended, the air changed from whispers to low, practical murmurs. In the parking lot, Linda hooked her arm through mine before I reached my car. She started listing things that needed handling at the house like a grocery list. Locks, utilities, mail, furniture, she rattled each item off like she already owned them. I just agreed with every point because arguing there felt like betraying my father somehow. Just ride with us and we will swing by together, it will be easier. She dangled that word easier like a treat for a tired dog and I followed. Rick unlocked his truck and shouted that they would meet me over there soon. I stood by my car keys in hand wondering when the day stopped belonging to me. I still got in and turned the engine because momentum felt safer than refusal. Driving behind their truck, I watched Linda's arm lean out the window in the mirror. Her hand moved as she talked and pointed back toward where the house waited. At the time it looked like support and leadership and family stepping up. Now when I replay it, I only see a hand reaching for something unearned. That was the first glimpse of them sliding their fingers into my life and closing. The lawyer slid a thick folder across the polished desk. I watched it stop right in front of me. My aunt dropped into the chair at my right without waiting. Her husband stayed near the door and leaned against the frame. I could feel every eye in that small room on me. The attorney opened the folder and laid 3 sheets on the desk. He asked if we were ready to review the will now. My throat locked for a second, but I nodded anyway. Lip gloss already shining, my aunt answered for everyone that we were. I had the weird sense of raising my hand after class, except this time there was no safe question. He read the formal parts fast, and I barely processed each line. When he reached the section about property, my spine went rigid. All real and personal assets are hereby left to my only child. He emphasized the last 3 words and then looked straight at me. In that moment the room narrowed down to paper and signatures and my aunt's shallow breathing beside me. She recovered fast and let out this brittle laugh that did not match her eyes. Well, obviously he wanted everyone looked after, we all know that. Her nails tapped the arm of her chair in a tight rhythm. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and asked if there were any questions. She opened her mouth again before I could form a single word. He never meant for her to carry all this alone, we talked about it. Linda angled her body toward him but kept one hand close to the documents. We always said the house should help the whole family, not just one person. The word only echoed in my head and suddenly felt heavy. I stared at my name on the page and started to feel like I had done something wrong just by existing. The attorney cleared his throat once and pointed at another paragraph near the bottom. Your father executed this last month and he was fully oriented. We discussed his decision at length and he affirmed it repeatedly. He did not mention any plan to divide ownership among other relatives. I watched my aunt's jaw flex as that little angle closed on her. She shifted tactics so fast it made my head spin for a second. Of course Erin deserves the security, we all want that for her. But there are practical issues involved: mortgage, taxes, insurance, all that fun stuff. It might be easier if our names were on the deed temporarily, just to streamline payments. The attorney's pen stopped moving as soon as she mentioned adding names. I felt every muscle in my back tighten and my fingers dug into my knees. A month earlier I would have probably nodded and gone along with that. In that chair with my father's signature staring up at me, I finally hesitated. I asked what putting other people on the deed would actually mean long term. The lawyer answered before my aunt could spin anything, and I will always be grateful for that tiny delay. He explained that sharing title would give every listed owner legal control. If one party changed their mind later, things could get extremely complicated. Removing people would require fresh signatures and sometimes even court involvement. Once the words court involvement landed, my stomach lurched and my aunt's smile froze. I realized this was not a casual suggestion, it was a grab disguised as concern, and I almost missed it. My aunt tried another angle and turned toward me with this wounded expression. We just want to protect what he built and keep outsiders away. Rick uncrossed his arms for the first time and shifted his weight forward. If something happens to you, where does that leave the rest of us? That question jabbed right into the one place I already felt guilty. I heard myself ask for a copy of the will like my voice belonged to someone else. The attorney nodded and started gathering documents for me to take. My aunt watched every movement and then asked if she could get duplicates. He told her she would receive formal notice in the mail, and that seemed to annoy her more than anything. I tucked the file under my arm like it was fragile and tried not to show how shaken I actually was. We walked back through the quiet lobby, and my aunt caught my elbow before I reached the door. She lowered her voice and called my name like we were sharing a secret. "Do not let that man scare you into shutting us out. Your dad would hate seeing us on opposite sides over pieces of paper." Her grip tightened just enough to hurt, and that tiny spike of pain is what finally woke me up. I pulled my arm free and heard my own tone harden in a way that surprised me. I told her I would review everything with a professional before signing anything else. For a second, her face went blank like the mask slipped, and she had not prepared for resistance. Rick opened the door with more force than necessary, and the frame rattled. Neither of them answered my comment, which somehow felt louder than if they had yelled. Out in the parking lot, the air hit my face, and I finally exhaled. They walked ahead and argued in low tones near their truck while I lingered beside my car. I could not hear the words, but their gestures were sharp and annoyed. At one point, Linda glanced back, and her expression was something I had never seen aimed at me before. It was quick, but it was not family, it was calculation, and I finally recognized it. I drove home with the folder seat belted beside me like a passenger. Every time I stopped at a light, I checked that it was still there. On the surface, nothing had exploded, yet no one had thrown anything. But inside that office, a line had been drawn, and I could feel it pressing against my ribs with every breath. I did not know it yet, but that folder was about to decide who in my family stayed in my life. I knew something was off the second I saw her car. It was already snug in the driveway when I turned the corner. The front door stood cracked open, and the porch light was on. I had not unlocked that door since the funeral, yet here we were. My hands went numb on the steering wheel while I watched shadows move inside. I forced myself out of the car and walked up anyway. From the doorway, I saw cartons stacked across the hallway like a maze. Rick crossed the space with my father's toolbox in his arms. He barely glanced at me before heading straight back toward their truck. That toolbox was supposed to be mine to sort when I was ready. I stepped over a roll of tape near my shoe and called for Linda. She popped out of the kitchen with a marker in her hand. "Oh good, you finally made it, we have been busy." She waved the marker at the piles like she was proud of the chaos. My chest tightened because no one had asked her to touch any of this. I asked how they got inside while I scanned the room. She jingled a small ring of metal from her pocket like it was nothing. "Your dad gave us a spare last year in case of emergencies." The word emergencies hung between us while she smiled a little too wide. I stared at the keys and could not shake the feeling that I had just discovered a lock picked in slow motion. Rick brushed past me again with an armful of equipment. He muttered something about getting the heavy stuff out before it walked off. When I followed him to the door, I saw their truck half loaded already. Items I recognized were stacked near the tailgate without any labels at all. It looked less like sorting and more like a silent exit. Back in the living room, I finally registered the writing on the cartons. Names were scrawled across the sides in quick block letters. Linda had tagged pieces with little notes like mine or guest room. I found one near the television that simply read our share. That two-word claim hit harder than anything she had said in the lawyer's office. "What is this system supposed to be?" I picked up the marker from the coffee table and turned it in my fingers. Linda adjusted one of the cartons so the handwriting faced the wall. "We are just grouping things before outsiders start picking through everything." I set the marker down harder than intended because I was very much an insider and she was acting like I was not. I headed down the hallway before I said something I could not take back. His bedroom door was propped open and the closet doors stood wide. Drawers were pulled out and stacked on the mattress in uneven towers. On top of one was a small pile with a note that read "Rick Tools." I felt heat climb up my neck because those labels were being written like signatures. I went straight for the dresser where he kept important stuff. The top drawers were half empty and the usual jumble was gone. Paper clips and loose coins sat where documents used to be. I dropped to my knees and checked the bottom drawer for the metal lockbox. There was only a shallow rectangle in the dust where it used to rest. My heart started banging in my ears as I stood up too fast. I checked the closet floor next even though I knew it was pointless. No metal box, no old combination lock, no sign of it anywhere. I walked back into the hallway, maybe a little harder than necessary. If they had moved that box without telling me, then this was not sorting anymore. Where is his safe? The words came out sharper than I intended as I stepped into the kitchen. Linda did not answer right away, she kept stacking plates into a carton. Rick paused in the doorway when he heard my tea. One change. The three of us froze there like some awful standoff over cardboard and ghosts. Rick broke first and scratched his jaw while he looked at his shoes. It was not secure here, we took it to keep it from disappearing. My pulse spiked because he used almost the same excuse about the tools. I asked where exactly it had gone because keep it safe was nowhere near enough. He shifted his weight and glanced toward Linda like she held the script. She finally turned and rested both hands on the counter. Relax, it is in our garage until things calm down around here. You have so much going on and people talk when a place sits empty. We did not want anyone breaking in and taking what he worked for. My fingers curled against my palms because I had not given them any permission to relocate anything. I told her the documents inside that box were my responsibility now. Her lips pressed together for a second like she was weighing how far to push. You are drowning and we are stepping up, it is not that deep. That sentence made my stomach twist because I knew she wanted me to feel small. It also told me she expected me to let this slide without another question. I did not drop it, I followed her back toward the hallway instead. She tried to redirect me with a new carton and asked me to mark donations. I set the marker down untouched every time she tried to hand it over. This is not about old sweaters, I need that box back this week. My voice shook but I kept going because backing off once would have invited everything. On the way to his desk, I noticed a stack of envelopes near the door. The tops were already torn and my name stared up from the corner. I picked one up and felt the air leave my lungs for a second. The letter inside was from the mortgage company and it was half out. Someone had opened it before I even knew it existed. I lifted the envelope and turned to face them both. Why are you opening mail addressed to me? Linda waved a dismissive hand and called it simple organization. We were just sorting bills, you cannot keep up with all this. She reached toward the stack like she might snatch it away if I blinked. I slid the opened envelopes into my bag before she could reach them. Then I walked to the entry table and picked up the bowl with the spare keys. Two identical ones were missing from the ring that used to sit there. I held up what remained and let the silence stretch for a few beats. The house felt crowded, but I had never felt more alone inside it. I told them we were changing how this was going to work. From now on, no one came here without me present and nothing left without a record. Linda laughed in a short, harsh burst that had zero humor in it. You cannot possibly think you can manage all this on your own. Her eyes flicked to Rick like she was checking if he would back her up. He stepped closer and planted himself between me and the front door. You are emotional and that is understandable, but do not throw accusations around. We have invested time and gas and energy helping you through this. The word invested made the hair rise on my arms because it sounded like a down payment. I realized they did not see their actions as favors at all. I took one step to the side so I could see the hallway again. The cartons, the stickers, the half-empty drawers, everything sharpened into one clear picture. Maybe you think I am ungrateful, fine, but this is not a group project. The will is clear and I am not signing anything that puts you in charge. My voice echoed harder than expected, and for once nobody interrupted. Linda's expression hardened in a way that finally matched her behavior. She reminded me that family is supposed to look out for each other. Then she added that people talk when someone hoards everything after a death. That last line landed like a warning, not a friendly observation. She was not just grabbing, she was building a story where I was the villain. I told them we were done for the day and started walking toward the door. Rick held his ground for a second, then moved aside with a frustrated breath. Linda gathered her bag slowly like she wanted me to change my mind. On her way out, she paused at the shelf and touched one framed photo. We can still do this the easy way if you stop listening to that lawyer. The door finally closed behind them and the house went quiet again. I locked it for the first time since the funeral and checked it twice. Then I leaned my forehead against the wood and pulled out my phone. My fingers typed a short message to the attorney before I could overthink it. They have the safe, the mail, and spare keys, and I think this just became a fight. My phone rang before I finished locking the front door. I was still leaning against the wood with the deadbolt under my palm. The attorney's number filled the screen and my chest kicked hard. For one stupid second, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. Then I hit accept because ignoring things is exactly how they win. You mentioned documents from your aunt. What exactly are we talking about? His voice came through steady and all business, which grounded me a little. I looked at my bag on the entry table like it might bite. A stack of forms Linda had shoved at me sat inside that bag. I told him I would scan everything and email it within the hour. I dumped the contents onto the kitchen table and started sorting fast. Most of it was junk flyers and sympathy cards I had not opened. In the middle lay a neat bundle clipped together in perfect order. Linda had given it to me at the house a few days earlier. She called it simple estate paperwork and told me to sign when I could. The top page looked harmless from a distance, which is exactly the trick. Once I actually read the title, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. It was an authorization naming Rick as something called administrator of estate. Further down a line gave him broad permission to manage accounts and property. My signature line sat waiting under a note in her handwriting that said just sign. You know that heavy rush when you realize someone counted on you folding. That is what ran through me while I stared at that empty line. I had almost signed it without reading the first time she handed it over. That thought made my hands shake hard enough to blur the words. I took photos of every page, then fed them into the scanner in silence. By the time I hit send on the email, my mouth felt dry. I paced between the table and the sink waiting for my phone again. Not even 5 minutes passed before it lit up on the counter. Got your documents, we need to talk right now, answer if you can. My pulse hammered so loud that I almost missed the first sentence. He went line by line while I stared at the blank refrigerator door. The first form was a management agreement that would hand Rick broad control. The second attempted to appoint Linda as personal representative through my signature. Taken together, they would give them practical power over everything without changing the will. He asked if I had authorized them to draft any of this on my behalf. I let out a short, ugly laugh that sounded nothing like me. No, I barely knew these existed until I dropped them on the table. He exhaled slowly through his teeth, and that sound scared me more than shouting. You were one pen stroke away from losing practical control of the entire estate. Hearing it in those exact words snapped something frozen inside me. Then he told me the part that really made my skin crawl. He had checked the county filings after my text about the safe and keys. There was already a petition submitted listing Linda as next of kin. On that sworn statement, I simply did not exist anywhere on the page. My throat burned because that was not confusion anymore that was erasing me. Are you sure it was her signature? I heard how naive that sounded even as I said it out loud. He confirmed it matched everything she had signed at the reading of the will. She had also written an explanation that you were not able to handle affairs. Grief does things, but I had never imagined being weaponized like that. For a second, I honestly questioned whether I was overreacting. Maybe she misunderstood some legal term and thought next of kin meant caretaker. Maybe this was all sloppy help and not a deliberate shove. He cut through that spiral with one flat sentence that ended the benefit of the doubt. This was a strategic move, and if we ignore it, they gain ground. He started giving instructions in that calm voice that makes people pay attention. First, change the locks today and control physical access to the house. Second, document everything: photographs, lists, receipts, even texts that mention property or money. Third, send a written demand for the return of the safe and any documents. If they refuse, we consider law enforcement, because at that point we have to. The word police made my stomach twist, even though I knew I had done nothing wrong. Part of me still hated the idea of dragging strangers into something family-related. Another part whispered that they had crossed that line the second they filed lies. I asked him if going this far would turn everything into a war. He answered that Linda had already fired the first shot, I just had not seen it. After we hung up, I sat very still and listened to the quiet. The house suddenly felt like neutral ground that could vanish with one bad decision. I forced myself up, grabbed my keys, and headed back out. At the hardware store, I bought new deadbolts and door knob sets with shaking hands. I installed them one by one until sweat ran down my back and my nerves eased. When the last lock clicked, I snapped photos of each door for proof. I also took pictures of the empty space where the safe had rested. Then I opened my laptop and started drafting the demand email the lawyer requested. Every sentence felt like walking across a thin line. Between polite and furious. In the end, I kept it simple because simple is harder to twist. I listed what they held and where I believed it was located now. I wrote that they had no permission to store or open estate property. I set a clear deadline for the safe to be returned to the house. I added that future access would be by appointment with me present at all times. Before hitting send, I read it twice and removed any word that sounded apologetic. The reply came faster than I expected, which told me they were watching closely. Linda wrote back from a joint account that included Rick's name on the address. Her message opened with a long paragraph about loyalty and sacrifice and love. Buried in the middle, she refused to move the safe because I was unstable. By the end, she hinted that they were considering reimbursement for everything they had done. You are not thinking clearly, and outside voices are poisoning you. That line jumped off the screen harder than anything else in the message. According to her, I had allowed some stranger in a suit to control my mind. She warned that once lawyers were involved, we could never go back to normal. The tone felt less like concern and more like a low-level threat. I forwarded her email to my attorney with one short sentence on top. This is how they are framing things. Does it change our plan? He called instead of writing back, which told me a lot in itself. He walked me through how to keep communication in writing and document every interaction. Then he mentioned something that made me grip the phone tighter. If they push this narrative farther, they might try to challenge your capacity. That would drag in doctors' evaluations and months of delays while assets sit frozen. I stood in the middle of the hallway and suddenly understood their angle. If they could not rewrite the will, they would try to sideline me personally. The safe, the mail, the spare keys were pieces in that larger attempt. He suggested a direct meeting with them sooner rather than later. Not alone and not at their place, but somewhere documented and neutral. The thought of sitting across from them again made my stomach flip. He offered to attend at the house with me present so boundaries were clear. I agreed before I could talk myself out of it because waiting felt worse. We picked a day 2 mornings out to give him time to prepare. He would bring printed copies of the will and the county filings. I would bring nothing except myself and whatever backbone I could scrape together. He warned me they might show up angry or performative or both at once. You hold the legal position here. Your job is to stay calm and let me handle the pushback. After we hung up, I walked through every room of the house slowly. I was not cataloging items, I was taking in what was at stake. Every drawer left open felt like a warning about how far they had reached already. Every missing object reminded me of how easy it is to lose things without a fight. This was no longer about furniture or tools, it was about whether my father's last choice actually stood. That night I barely slept, yet my mind would not stop rehearsing. I kept seeing Linda across the table trying to flip the story again. I imagined Rick filming everything and twisting every raised voice into evidence. By sunrise, I knew exactly one thing for sure. If I backed down at that meeting, I would never get another clean chance to draw a line. The knock hit the door before I finished straightening my shirt. I had been rehearsing calm lines out loud like a weirdo. My attorney stood on the porch with a slim briefcase and a tired face. He stepped inside without small talk and scanned the hallway like a checklist. "You ready for this?" he asked while locking the new deadbolt himself. Ready is not the word I would use, but I nodded anyway. He set his case on the dining table and flipped the latches open. 2 neat stacks came out, one stamped county, one marked copy. He placed my folder at my end and the filings near his seat. "We will stay in this room, we will keep voices level," he said. Through the front window, I spotted their truck rolling up to the curb. My throat tightened and my palms went slick against the back of a chair. Rick pulled in crooked like usual and bumped the curb on purpose. Linda sat very straight in the passenger seat and never looked at the house. This was not a visit, this was an entrance. Rick climbed out with his phone already in his hand. Linda adjusted her jacket and smoothed her hair like she was going on camera. They conferred for a second at the hood before walking toward the porch. I felt my attorney step up behind me, a quiet presence at my shoulder. For once I did not open the door until I had taken one full breath. When I swung it wide, Rick lifted the phone higher. "Wow, official now, filming to protect ourselves," he said. He panned slowly across the doorway until he caught the attorney in frame. "Linda Guy." Via tight smile that never reached her eyes. I asked them to step inside or go home, no middle ground. They chose inside and walked past me without waiting for an invitation. My attorney greeted them by name and gestured toward the dining table. I noticed immediately that he had placed the will dead center. He also had a small recorder running beside his elbow, its light blinking. "We are documenting this meeting for everyone's protection," he said calmly. Linda slid into the chair across from me and folded her hands. Rick stayed standing behind her shoulder, phone still aimed at the room. "Let's get through this, we have other responsibilities today," she said. That line stung more than it should have, but I let it pass. I focused on not gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles popped. My attorney started first, which helped, I would have stumbled. He summarized the will in 3 short sentences and referenced the date. He then placed the county petition beside it, turned so they could read. "This sworn statement lists you as sole surviving relative and omits Aaron entirely." His finger tapped the missing line like a quiet gavel. Linda did not even look down at the paper right away. "Lawyers write those things in complicated ways," we trusted the clerk. My attorney did not blink, he just rotated the petition toward himself. "The handwriting on this explanation belongs to you," that part did not confuse. "You described her as incapable due to emotional distress," his voice stayed steady. For the first time, Rick lowered his phone a few inches. Linda finally glanced at the paragraph and her jaw shifted. I was worried about her mental state, she lost her father. Plenty of people freeze under pressure, we were stepping in so things didn't collapse. She tossed the words out like bandages, hoping one would stick. I could feel every muscle between my shoulders pull tight. I leaned forward and kept my eyes on the petition. "You knew exactly what you were doing when you erased me. You did not write grieving, you wrote unfit to manage anything." Saying it out loud made my voice shake, but I did not back off. Rick lifted the phone again, zooming in on my face. "There it is, that attitude, you are twisting what we tried to do. You blocked us from the property and threatened to call cops on family. We had to protect ourselves before you turned everyone against us." Hearing him call it protection almost made me laugh almost. My attorney cut through the noise with one quiet question. "Where is the safe right now, and is anything removed from inside?" That got both of their attention faster than any speech. Rick's thumb stopped moving on the phone screen and he swallowed. Linda answered slowly that it was in their garage like she had said before. My attorney slid a printed letter across the table. "This is a formal demand for immediate return of that locked container. You will sign acknowledging that it belongs to the estate under Aaron's control. We also expect any copied documents or photographs taken from inside. If you refuse, we involve investigators and things escalate from there." Linda's cheeks flushed and her fingers dug into the edge of the chair. "You really called a lawyer here to threaten us under his roof. All because you want every last screw with your name on it." I caught the word roof and felt heat rise up my neck. "This isn't about screws, it's about you trying to replace me on paper." Rick stepped around the chair so he could lean over the table. "You think a judge will just hand you everything without questions. You don't have a husband, you don't have kids, you live alone." He tossed those facts out like proof that I needed supervision. That moment is when I stopped wishing we could repair anything. My attorney did not raise his voice, which made his words land harder. Family status does not impact the validity of a properly executed will. Filing false statements with the county, however, opens you to criminal exposure. Right now, we are choosing a meeting instead of charges, not the other way around. You can decide whether this ends today or keeps growing teeth. The room went very still after that sentence. I saw it in their faces when the word criminal finally registered. Linda's eyes flicked to Rick and his jaw clenched hard. The phone dipped even lower until it aimed at the tabletop. This was the first time I believed they might actually back up. Linda reached for the demand letter but did not pick up the pen. We have invested time and money into securing that property since he passed. If we bring things back, we expect reimbursement for all of it. My attorney pushed another sheet forward, this one itemizing specific costs he already knew. We can settle legitimate expenses in writing after the safe returns, not before. Rick gave a short, bitter laugh that sounded more nervous than amused. So we walk out as villains and she walks out as hero. You really think anyone in this family will speak to you again after this? His hand shook slightly as he lifted the phone back up. The threat landed softer than he intended, but it landed. I looked straight at him, which I had been avoiding all morning. If the price of keeping my father's wishes means losing you, I pay it. I will not trade my name on that will for your approval. You chose this path when you lied about me to a judge. My voice came out low and for once completely clear. My attorney turned the pen so it pointed toward Linda. Here are your options, documented and recorded with your own video. Return the safe today, sign acknowledging her authority, we move on. Or decline and we file our own motion with attached exhibits by Friday. That timeline is not a bluff and you both know it. Linda stared at the pen so long I thought she might snap it. Then she snatched it off the table and signed with 3 quick strokes. She added her initials where he pointed without more argument. Rick hesitated, then scrawled his name under hers with an angry flourish. He pressed hard enough that the paper crinkled under his hand. All right, my attorney said, let's finish this. You will bring the safe from your truck now into this room. If it is not here in 15 minutes, I will make the call. Rick's head jerked up and his eyes flashed for a second. He muttered something under his breath and stomped toward the door. I had not realized the safe was that close until then. In my mind, it had been buried deep under boxes in their garage. Hearing truck made something cold slide down my back. They had brought it here like a bargaining chip for this exact meeting. I followed them to the porch with my attorney just behind. Rick swung open the truck bed and there it was near the front. Old, heavy, familiar, the same dents along the top edge. He dragged it to the tailgate and jumped down with a small grunt. Linda watched from the sidewalk with her arms locked across her chest. For once she stayed quiet while he and my attorney carried it inside. When they set it on the dining floor, the sound echoed. I felt my knees soften, like some part of me had been unclenched. The attorney snapped another photo of it from 2 angles. He noted the time out loud so it appeared on their recording. That tiny detail comforted me more than any speech could have. Linda stepped back over the threshold like the house suddenly disgusted her. You think he wanted lawyers and threats hanging over his memory? He wanted this place to help everyone, not turn us against each other. Her voice wobbled on that last part, which almost cracked something in me. Almost, but not enough to forget her signature on that petition. I answered gently, which surprised even me. He wanted me to be able to stay here without strings. He trusted me, not a committee, not a group vote. I am just doing the job he gave me, even if it hurts. Saying that out loud finally felt like picking a side mine. Rick opened his mouth like he had another shot loaded. Then he seemed to think better of it and shook his head once. Enjoy your empty holidays, you made your choice, he said on his way out. Linda followed him without looking back, heels sharp on the porch boards. Their truck roared away a minute later, louder than necessary. Inside, the house felt bizarrely quiet, even with the safe sitting there. My attorney closed his briefcase and gave me a measured look. This will not stop them from talking, but it stops them on paper. If they try anything else, we have today's record and their signatures. You did exactly what you needed to do, even if your hands shake. After he left, I sat alone at the table with that metal box. I did not open it right away, I just rested my hand on top. Everything that started this mess was probably inside, but that could wait. For the first time since the funeral, the house actually felt like mine. I had kept the roof, but the family I thought I had walked out the door.